Hey, hey, Mystic Magic Podcast fans. It's Reverend Celeste with our guest today, Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. And Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson is a Renaissance man. And that's why the name of this episode is Renaissance Man. I'm going to stop. And start over. Hey, hey, Mystic Magic Podcast fans. What a wonderful day we're going to have today. I am Reverend Celeste Frazier, and this is my guest, Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. He's a Renaissance man, and that's why we're calling this episode Renaissance Man. He is a lifelong learner. He's got a passion for self-development, for personal transformation, and he is really into self-awakening. And he lives his bliss as a teacher, a mentor, a speaker, a minister, and more. And I want to talk about the and more part. His life journey has been quite the ride, and his mission is to live and move and be an active member of society who serves to educate, elucidate, emancipate, awaken, and empower people. He currently serves as the senior minister of the Center for Spiritual Living Greater Baltimore. He's served on the Diversity and Inclusion Commission for the Centers for Spiritual Living, as well as the World Ministry of Prayer. And he's also participated in global panels. And he wants to build more meaningful connections with more religious science and unity and other new thought leaders. He also teaches workshops and classes on various subject matters. He's an author, and he does all kinds of fun stuff. And so it's my joy to welcome Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson.
Thank you, Reverend Celeste. It is a pleasure being here with you, as always.
I'm so glad that you are here. We have to make more time to talk so that we don't have to schedule podcasts to do so.
Amen. Amen. Yes, yes, I'm with you on that one.
So tell me about this thing that you like to do that's at the intersection of New Thought spirituality and LGBTQI people.
Okay, so I guess the short answer in terms of why I do that is because growing up with a fundamental Christian background and, you know, being taught that being LGBTQIA stuff is, you know, it's a sin, it's an abomination and all this other stuff. So in my spiritual path, learning that it's actually the opposite, that there's a book, Salvatore Sapienza wrote a book called Gay is a Gift. And reading that book and several other books about, you know, whether it's gay tantra or being a gay witch or whatever, it's this idea that being LGBTQIA is miraculous, marvelous, and fantastic.
Yes.
So how do I bridge spirituality, because it's often not seen that way, and let people in our community know that it's actually, I can be bold, I can be unapologetic, I can be, you know, I can be magnificent in my gayness. So it's how do I bring that, because there's a lot of folks in the LGBTQIA community who are suffering from depression and all kind of things, and it stems from religion and spirituality being lumped upon them in a not so life affirming way. So I'm like, how do I change the channel on that and let folks know, no, it's time to shine brightly.
Well, yeah, I mean, God loves us all, and God created us all in his image and likeness. So, you know, what would make any person lesser? That's just not or possible.
Exactly.
Even if it's not even real.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for, you know, doing so. Thank you for being willing to just, you know, face it head on. You know, I remember part of my spiritual breakthrough, and I may have mentioned this on here before, was just in a practitioner training class, and the topic was sexuality.
Mm.
And I'm like crying, like screaming, like wailing.
Wow.
And the minister who was teaching, Reverend Sage, was like, would anyone like prayer? And I'm thinking to myself, lady, do you not hear over here wailing? Right?
Right, like, isn't it obvious?
Well, all of the self-inflicted racism, sexism, and homophobia just came up.
Yeah.
And it was like there was no room for them to be in my body, my spirit. Right? It was like bye, and they were trying to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
it's like once you pluck one of those strings, it's like Audre Lorde said, we don't lead these lives that are, you know, single issue lives. When you strike one string, it's going to cause the other strings to vibrate too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was a wonderful purging. And so, yeah, so many of our youth need to be able to get that because they need support.
Yes. Agreed. 1000%. I mean, just the number of homeless gay teens in New York City alone is staggering.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, like, how do we, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. And so thank God for ministries that address it, you know, and support people unapologetically and unconditionally.
Amen.
So we've had a number of New Thought ministers on Mystic Magic, but we haven't had any Reiki masters. So tell me about the energy work that you do and how this transforming energy work is a healing.
So for me, because I've had a very eclectic spiritual path, spiritual background, all of that comes into who I am now. So while being a licensed CSL minister, there's also the spiritual intersections of where shamanistic training or magic or Reiki or any of this other stuff comes into play. And initially it started as, how do I better me? It's sort of like that experience you had in the prac training. It's like, oh my goodness, all of this stuff comes up. So for me, when stuff started to come up, you know, I ended up moving from Pittsburgh and ended up homeless for a while and broke up with the person I thought I was going to marry and this and that and the other and all this stuff. My father ended up dying and just a whole lot of things. And I came across the opportunity to study Reiki. Let me see what this is about. Mm-hmm. So I went and had my first Reiki treatment and was like, wait a minute. Like, I do martial arts, so I know this thing about chi. What is this thing with Reiki? Oh, it's a kind of cousin. Wait a minute, let me study this. So I became, you know, level 1 and started performing Reiki and then became a Reiki master. So for me, the whole thing is always about how do I keep my channel clear, keep my chakras open, my consciousness focused, and my thoughts pristine and life affirming. Because wherever I show up, I want that energy to radiate off of me. Like, I don't want it to specifically be, hold on, I have to, you know, do Reiki for you to receive it. No, I want the very presence when I walk into a room for whatever that is to emanate from me. So it's always about how do I keep myself clean, clear, and focused. So all of the work I do, it's how do I keep me focused? I can't give you anything to drink from an empty cup. It's like, here, have a sip. Oh, wait a minute, it's empty. So it's like, how do I keep my cup full?
Okay. Well, how did you get on the shaman path? That's an interesting point too.
Way back, I don't know how old I was. I think I was in middle school. My mother and I were walking past this old church that's not too far from, you know, the family house. And there was this old Native American guy just sitting there on the stoop, you know, with a cigar, and he's just chilling. And so my mother said, hey, Kazoo, how's it going? And he's like, I'm doing fine, Lois, how are you? And, you know, they chat for a moment. We keep on walking. And I'm like, Mom, who is this? I've never seen this guy before. Who is this? She said, oh, that's like a cousin. He's one of our cousins. And I said, wait a minute. Isn't he? And I used the term that, isn't he an Indian? And she said, yes. And I said, wait, how's he our cousin? She said, we've got Native American in our blood. I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean? What do you mean? So over the years, learning what that meant. And then I started having conversations with him, and he just started talking about, I think it was his, I want to say grandfather or an older uncle who was like a grandfather, started talking to him about eagles and the eagle medicine and turtle medicine and all this other stuff. And I was like, okay, when I get of an age, I need to look into this a little bit more. So fast forward many years later, I had an opportunity to go to a powwow when I lived in Richmond and got exposed to the whole concept of being two-spirit and what it means to be a medicine person or shaman. And it's like, okay, so I took a couple of classes and whatnot, and they were like, okay, officially that's what you are now. So walk, tread gently on the earth and do what you are here to do. So like, gotcha.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I wish I had more interaction with my Native American roots, or my native roots, I should say.
Right.
We were natives before we were called Americans.
Right, exactly.
So I know that I've been a student of yours in learning sign language. So I know you're a great teacher. What's so satisfying about the work that you do as an interpreter for the non-hearing population?
So I'm retired now, but when I was an active interpreter, it was always, the satisfaction was always about knowing that I am providing a much needed and much wanted service to the members of the deaf community. I'm providing access. I'm giving them the ability to go wherever they want to go, whether it's a job interview, a medical appointment, to see a play at the Kennedy Center. I'm affording them the opportunity to do what the majority of hearing people get to do without even thinking about it, because they automatically have access. Right. I'm bridging that gap, and that was so satisfying. That and the opportunity to just chat with deaf people, because I love the culture, I love the language.
I actually had my one little episode where I was in the grocery store, and there was a non-hearing person in front of me, and you know, I was acknowledging him and did a little bit that I knew. And he just got all animated and excited. Yep.
Right. So just take that.
Yeah.
You, because here's this gentleman, you said is a gentleman, right?
Yes.
He's going throughout his day and there's hearing person, and no one's interacting with him in any meaningful way. And then he crosses your path and you sign something to him. And it's like, oh, finally, someone in this store, someone during my day speaks my language. Mm-hmm. Wow. That, and you said he lit up. Mm-hmm. That's like, oh, wow, how rewarding to know that I was able, just because I knew a couple of signs, I was able to brighten this man's day. Yes. Like, that's powerful.
Yes.
Loved it.
So I know that your mission is to be authentic, compassionate, transparent, inspired, vibrant, and empowered. Mission accomplished. And I love how you educate and maneuver around some problematic aspects of some of our colleagues with racial illiteracy and insensitivity. Right. What gives you the patience and discipline to do so? Because I need help. Is it your high school teacher background?
Ooh, I hear you on that. Trust and believe. And yes, that's exactly what it is. It was when I was a public school teacher, middle school and high school, because it's not just, and I always remind people, it's not just the patience with the students, it's the other teachers, it's the parents and guardians, it's the patience with all of them. And just a real quick example, when I was most recently teaching in a high school, and I was teaching sign language this time around, and you know how you go to the little teacher workshop-y things, you know, in-service days. And at one of these in-service days, whoever was conducting the training that day said, well, we've done a study, and the study says that when you have African-American students in your room and they're not actively learning, turn some music on and let them dance and move. And I was like, hold on. Tell me you did not just say, turn the music on and let the darkies dance, and then they'll want to do the subject. Don't do that for the white students, but let the Black students shake a tail feather and they'll be ready to do math. I was like, oh, you know what? Woo! So patience with colleagues as well, other teachers, because there were teachers that were like, yes, yes, finally I have the magic key. Like, no, sit down, Karen, sit down. Let me inform you that if my mother was here today and she heard that, she would strike this teacher. She would say, what are you talking about? That is not, you tell my son to sit down and do what he's supposed to do, not dance. So yes, public school, as a middle school teacher, a high school teacher with colleagues and parents and guardians. Yes, being patient with all of them, knowing wherever they are. If I'm an educator, then how do I breathe and move through it? And sometimes it's, not today. I was
listening to a comedian the other day, and he used to be a high school teacher, and he left that to become a comedian. I guess the audiences were easier.
Yes, the bridge from one to the other ain't too far, bridge. Yes, I understand.
And I see that you're a fellow actor. Tell me about the work that you did with STARS, STARS, and let us know what the acronym stands for.
So when I got involved in sign language in Pittsburgh, that's where I'm originally from, and I went to an event called the Sign-a-thon, which is a Deaf Awareness Day event. And I saw people doing all kinds of stuff with sign language, and they're doing skits, and they're doing signing music, and they're doing all kinds of things. And none of the groups would let me join them. So my first sign language teacher said, start your own performance company. So I created STARS, which stands for Sticking Together Always Results in Success. And my group, we started doing the same thing. I had always wanted to be involved in theater and, acting and doing stuff. So that was my first entry point into it. Fast forward many years later, I got my MFA in theater education from Virginia Commonwealth University, started doing plays, a couple of things on TV, some extra work, and then moved to the DC area and started Believe, which is the next evolution of STARS, also an acronym. Being empowered, living inspired, exemplifying victory every day.
All right.
So it's basically nice. How do you bring this theatrical stuff to the deaf community, specifically in their language?
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
A lot of times you only see non-hearing people being interpreters at a play, but it's great to have performing people. And, thank God, Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA have started to be more progressive in getting more work for that population as well.
Amen.
So this awakening is a slow process, and we just have to be steady about encouraging it along, right?
For sure.
So Martial Magus, is that the way you pronounce that? I see that you're adept in the martial arts, and you mentioned it before. What drew you into martial arts, and how does that relate to the spiritual work that you do?
So I got into it because I was bullied as a child, and I got tired of giving my Pop-Tarts to the bullies and my Twinkies. I was like, look, I want to eat. Okay, fine, here, take it. And my oldest brother took me to see a Bruce Lee film, my first Bruce Lee film. And it was a double feature back in the day when theaters had double features. And I saw 2 Bruce Lee movies, and throughout the entire viewing, I just sat there with my eyes large and my jaw dropped. Like, wait a minute, you can do stuff with your body like this? No. So I started studying it years and years and years. And the number one thing that I learned first, because I used to watch the David Carradine Kung Fu television series. So even before I actually took a class in it or studied it technically, I was already steeped in the idea of being a martial artist is a spiritual path first. It was created by spiritual folks and then became a fighting style. But the through line is always supposed to be self-empowerment, betterment, self-improvement. How do I always chop wood, carry water in the most effective way? So even now, I don't practice martial arts specifically for self-defense. I practice it for health and well-being. I teach it for health and well-being, not for fighting. So any of the weapons I'm using or teaching, it's always about how is this teaching me to harmonize all parts of my body? How is it teaching me to bring my mind so I'm not remembering the form or the kata, but I've embodied it? Because that's ultimately what we're doing with spiritual practices. We're embodying whatever spirit is.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Grasshopper.
Ah, I snatched it from you. I can leave now.
Apparently, you're also into superheroes. So,
No,
what's that story, Superman?
Very similar. So, growing up, you know, watching Linda Carter's Wonder Woman on television, and you know, all of the stuff that was on Man from Atlantis, $6 Million Man, all of that. And I grew up in an abused house, so comic books became one of my escapes. And so, escaping to Superman was the first comic book I ever owned. So Superman has a very close affinity with me, but comic books were the escape. And then when I started learning how to draw, paint, and all that other stuff, it was like, well, I started from the comic book resource materials. Like, someone drew this. So I started, it's like years ago, you would go through magazines and have the little turtle head or the little rabbit and said, if you can draw this, then you can do that. So I started copying the images in the comic book, and it taught me how to draw. So when I took my first actual art class, like, I already had a foundation. So comic books for me now are modern day mythology. It's the hero's journey in the form of T'Challa, Black Panther, Superman, Wonder Woman. Like, it's the hero's journey. So anything that you read in a comic book, it's no different than reading scripture to me.
Yes.
It's the same stuff.
Absolutely. And the journey is the human journey as we move through our challenges and grow and expand and make greater choices and
exactly
become more powerful in and of ourselves.
Exactly. Like, I remind, since you just mentioned that, I remind people, Peter Parker became Spider-Man simply because his Uncle Ben taught him, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, doesn't the Bible say, to whom much is given, much is required? It's the same thing.
Right.
So it's like, oh, gotcha. Be accountable.
So where does the visual artist rank in terms of all of the things that you enjoy doing?
Oh man, I can't hierarchy.
Okay.
It's right up there. It's one of my forms of, I don't sell art right now. I'm going to get back to selling it. But right now, it's me getting back into what it means to be creative. What does it mean to simply put my thoughts, my dreams, and when I say dreams, I mean like when I'm sleeping, the surrealistic images that I'm dreaming about, to put that on paper or on canvas or in clay or whatever. How do I let that stuff out?
Yeah.
Then how do I share it with others?
Yeah, I just finished a 6-week art class. It's very therapeutic.
Yes. What kind of art class was it?
It's kind of a spiritual art class. And so all kinds of things emerged.
Okay.
You know, and feeling pretty good about some of the work I did.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
You don't have to share.
Well, I am just so grateful that you said yes to come on Mystic Magic, and I'm just thrilled to learn more about you. You're always a joy, and I'm just so glad you came along and brightened this corner of my world.
I'm honored.
So, all the best to you. I want to know what's coming up, either for your center or just regular stuff that you'd like our international audience to know about.
So things relating to the center, I mean, there's this thing right now called pandemic. So right now, everything is virtual. So the next thing we are working on at CSL Greater Baltimore is, how do we continue this virtual presence even when we are in the physical space once again? Because right now, well, CSL has the vision of a world that works for all. Well, right now, centers are reaching people that they didn't reach before.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, we have a global community now. So how does CSL Greater Baltimore play into that? For me personally, I'm sort of, because my mother transitioned on Father's Day, so I'm in a kind of limbo where I feel it's time for me to reinvent, reassess, reinvent who I am and what that means to have neither parent living, to have family that have basically disowned me for a variety of reasons, and to no longer have that connection with Pittsburgh for family other than my main thing is the deaf community there. I'm still connected with them. So for me, my next thing is, who am I? Who do I choose to be? And how do I choose to show up? So just exploring that.
Okay. And so in the meantime, people can find you on Facebook, CSL Greater Baltimore on Facebook, right?
Yes. And they can type my name in and I'll come up. And my website, www.raymont, that's with a T, raymontanderson.com.
Great, great, great. Well, I know people are going to want to find out more about you because you're so intriguing and multidimensional.
Mysterious.
All right, my brother, you take good care, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you. Much love.
This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives.